Iran launched numerous missile attacks towards Israel throughout Friday, sending people into shelters.
Israeli Defense Forces say fragments of Iranian missile left an impact near what Israel calls Temple Mount, one of the holiest sites.
One blast blew a crater just inside Jerusalem's Old City after an incoming missile warning. Police cordoned off the area.
Deep inside the deserts of Jordan, a team of archaeologists entered a narrow cave system that locals had avoided for generations. And what they found inside immediately raised questions. As their light swept across the stone walls, they revealed ancient pillars carved directly into the rock, leading deeper into a hidden chamber that looked more like a forgotten temple than a natural cave. Inside the chambers, statues and shrines had been carved into the walls, their faded colors and worn faces suggesting they had stood there for thousands of years. When the helicopter lifted off and began flying back across the desert, one of the researchers noticed something strange below, the remains of massive stone structures partially buried in the sand. Skeletons were scattered everywhere, some lying in rows along the walls, others piled across the passageways as if hundreds of people had died there at once. The deeper they walked into the ruin, the more bones appeared, stretching through the corridors like a silent grave. And standing in the middle of the chamber, surrounded by the remains, the team realized the ruins might not have been a normal settlement at all, but possibly the site of a forgotten catastrophe that no one had recorded in history.
One person was killed and two others critically injured when an Iranian missile struck central Israel. The victims were construction workers at a site where missile debris landed. At least 6 impact sites reported today after cluster bomb attack over the country.
What if the terrifying nights we are witnessing over Jerusalem are not just modern warfare, but the literal awakening of ancient mechanisms that have been dormant for thousands of years? When you see missiles streaking across the sky toward the holiest sites on the planet, do you feel like you are watching a news report? Or do you feel like you are watching a cosmic clock hit zero? The world watched in absolute horror as the sky didn't just rain fire, but unleashed a hailstorm so violent and unnatural that it felt like the atmosphere itself was rejecting our presence. And I have to ask you if you think it is a coincidence that the ground began to collapse into itself, without a single tectonic plate moving or a single storm system passing through. Can a city as ancient as Jerusalem really just fall apart under its own weight? Or is there something shifting beneath the bedrock that the global powers are desperate to keep quiet? As the sirens echoed across the valley and the Iron Dome lit up the horizon like a false sun, the radar picked up objects that didn't behave like metal or fuel. So what exactly were those strange trails entwining with the rocket paths? And why were they flashing with a light that no human technology has ever been able to replicate? When a soldier on the ground is asked what he is reading, and he points to a history of the Jewish-Roman battles, you have to wonder if he knows something about the cycle of empires that we have all forgotten. Because if that ancient war was lost, and the temple was demolished, why is the focus suddenly shifting to the future of the future instead of the past? Who is Rome today in this high-tech digital age? And is it possible that Rome was never just a city, but a persistent global system that is now preparing for a conflict that hasn't even officially begun yet? I am adding a perspective here that you won't hear on the mainstream news, which is the possibility that these geological sinkholes and atmospheric anomalies are being triggered by the very frequency of the conflict itself, as if the Earth is reacting to the spiritual and physical tension concentrated at the Western Wall. Does it disturb you to think that the flashes of light between the bullet trajectories might be a form of ancient atmospheric defense, or perhaps a tear in the fabric of what we perceive as reality. If history is being studied as a blueprint for an upcoming battle, rather than a memory of a lost one, then where does that leave you and your family in the grand scheme of this unfolding empire? Every time we see these inexplicable lights appearing above the center of the planet's most spiritually charged landscape, we have to ask if the ancient monuments were built to mark these spots or to contain what lies beneath them. If you believe that these trails in the sky are more than just debris, then you need to tell me in the comments what you think is really being intercepted up there. Because the official narrative is starting to crumble faster than the streets of Jerusalem themselves. Are we looking at the end of a cycle or the beginning of a system that will change the definition of power forever? And if the next war cannot be lost, then what lengths will the unseen New Rome go to in order to ensure its survival at any cost to humanity? What if the sirens echoing over the ancient limestone of Jerusalem aren't just warning of incoming steel, but are actually signaling the final countdown of a global synchronization that has been centuries in the making? Does it strike you as a massive anomaly that the world's most powerful military minds are now standing in subterranean tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, not to discuss strategy, but to witness what they openly call a series of modern miracles? When Peter Hegseth stands amidst the wreckage of thousands of years of history and speaks of a divine plan unfolding in real time, you have to ask yourself if we are looking at a religious conviction or a highly calculated geopolitical roadmap designed to trigger a global reset. Is it possible that the dates 1917, 1948, 1967, and 2017 aren't just milestones in a history book, but are actually precise activation codes for a system that is moving toward a final, irreversible objective? If the British Empire's declaration and the sudden shifting of a superpower's embassy were just the opening acts, then what does that say about the endgame involving the reconstruction of a third temple on the most contested piece of land on the entire planet? I am adding a perspective here that you won't hear in the news, which is the theory that this isn't just a battle over religion, but a struggle for a specific energy frequency located exactly at the center of these spiritual sites. Why is the sky itself suddenly turning into an erratic weapon, dropping solid blocks of ice with such force and precision that it feels like a localized atmospheric collapse rather than a natural storm system? If there were no significant storm patterns detected on radar and no gradual buildup in the clouds, then how do you explain the atmosphere shifting from calm to violent in a matter of seconds, as if a switch had been flipped by an unseen hand? Does the explanation of atmospheric instability satisfy you when the hail falls only above the ancient fortifications and nowhere else? Or do you suspect that the collision of high-tech missile defense and concentrated belief is literally tearing holes in the local weather patterns? What if the ancient scripts describing fire from the sky weren't metaphors, but were early human attempts to describe directed energy or atmospheric displacement that we are only now beginning to understand through modern physics? As the sirens continue to wail and the Iron Dome creates a ceiling of fire above the city, we must ask who truly benefits from this escalating tension, and whether the new Rome of our era is using these ancient sites as a catalyst for a global control system that would make the old empires look like amateurs. If the past war was lost, then who is directing the current one to ensure that the outcome is different? And what role do these unexplained aerial flashes play in the grand design of a heaven on earth that feels more like a digital panopticon? I want you to tell me in the comments if you have noticed the sun's corona behaving strangely during these events, or if you think the earth opening up into sinkholes without a single tremor is a sign that the very foundation of our reality is being hollowed out. Could it be that the miracles described by political figures are actually the results of a hidden technology that manipulates both the ground and the sky to fulfill a sequence that was written thousands of years ago. When you see the viral footage of trails entwining with missiles, ask yourself why the light pulses in a rhythm that matches no known human aircraft, and why the world's focus is being pulled back to this single point in the desert, as if the rest of the globe doesn't matter. Are we witnessing a clash of ideologies, or are we just the observers of a massive experiment in human perception and planetary engineering, where the stakes are the very future of the future? If the next miracle requires the demolition of existing structures and the rewriting of international law, then how far are these forces willing to go before the rest of the world realizes that the sirens aren't just for Jerusalem, but for all of us? Why is it that exactly when the geopolitical tension reaches its peak, the natural world decides to mirror that chaos, with unprecedented weather anomalies that defy every meteorological model we have? If the sky has become a mirror of our own internal conflict, then what happens when the reflection finally shatters, and we are left with a reality that no longer follows the rules of the past? I am posing a question that no one else is asking, which is whether the temple being discussed is a physical building at all, or a sophisticated global network designed to broadcast a new form of authority over every living soul on this planet. If you believe that the concentrated nature of this storm was a coincidence, then you aren't paying attention to the way the energy of this city has been manipulated to create a spiritual and physical pressure cooker. What if the history we are being told to remember is actually a distraction from the reality we are being forced to build? What if the very soil beneath Jerusalem is not just layers of dust and bone, but a sophisticated, ancient biological hard drive that is being decrypted by the sheer frequency of modern warfare? When workers excavating the periphery of the old city struck a massive stone slab carved with symbols that defy every known linguistic database on the planet, it wasn't just an archaeological find. It was a systemic trigger. Why is it that these marks, which some scholars are terrified to admit resemble a countdown to a final era, emerged precisely now, after being sealed under centuries of imperial debris, as if they were waiting for the specific atmospheric pressure of 2026 to be brought into the light? It's not just the mystery of the script that is disconcerting. It's the intentionality of its placement, exact, hauntingly old, and surfacing not during an era of global stability, but during a moment where the world feels like it is vibrating on the edge of a total collapse. Is it possible that the stone isn't just a record of the past, but a physical anchor for a sequence of events that we are only now beginning to witness from the sky down to the subterranean depths? This is just my point of view, but I believe the timing of this discovery is a localized reaction to the immense spiritual and physical tension concentrated at the center of the world, almost as if the earth itself is a conscious entity responding to the chaos above. We see the hail falling in massive, solid blocks of ice, and we hear the meteorological explanations about abrupt temperature inversions and pressure drops. And we see the ground opening up into hollow voids without a single tectonic tremor. But does that sterile scientific narrative truly feel complete to you? How can we look at the atmosphere literally shattering into ice, the crust of the planet failing into sinkholes, and advanced missile defense systems lighting up the horizon all within the same narrow window of time, and call it a coincidence? The sirens echoing through the valleys of Jerusalem have become the mechanical heartbeat of a new reality. And while the rockets are a tragic constant of modern geopolitics, the directional movement of these events, from the heavens to the surface to the hidden layers below, suggests a synchronization that defies every law of probability. Why is this city, which occupies less than 1% of the Earth's landmass, the absolute epicenter for every geological, aerial, and political anomaly that threatens to rewrite human history? No other location functions as such a violent lightning rod for the world's three major belief systems: where every single inch of ground is a battleground for the fulfillment of blueprints that were drawn up thousands of years ago. Does it disturb you to realize that the Temple Mount and the Western Wall might not just be places of prayer, but are actually active nodes in a global energy grid that is currently being recalibrated by the forces of modern technology and ancient intent? I want you to take a deep breath because the information we are about to uncover is heavier than anything we've discussed before. And I need you to stay with me until the very end because once we conclude this analysis, I will be offering a special prayer for the protection and peace of every single person watching this and their families during these dark hours. I am adding a perspective here that most analysts are too afraid to touch. What if the geological sinkholes are being caused by the displacement of whatever energy is being tapped by the intense focus of millions of people on this single point in the desert? Now, consider the viral footage that is currently being scrubbed from various platforms. A speaker at a high-level meeting in Israel discussing a speculative scenario where a foreign missile strike could be used as the perfect legal and physical cover to demolish the existing sacred sites on the Mount. Can you imagine the level of desperation required to even voice the idea of using a regional war to clear the path for a third miracle that would require the literal destruction of the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque? Even if this is dismissed as an extreme fringe opinion, the fact that it exists within the discourse of power suggests that belief has officially overtaken strategy as the primary driver of global events. What happens to our civilization when the people holding the launch codes are no longer motivated by borders or resources, but by the desire to trigger the final chapter of an ancient prophecy? For the Islamic world, this is the site of the miraculous nighttime journey. For the Jewish people, it is the home of the Holy of Holies. And for millions of Christians, its transformation is the ultimate green light for the end of the world. So when these three massive tectonic plates of human belief collide on a single hilltop, are we watching a political dispute or are we watching the literal friction of the end of the world? This leads us to the law of eschatological convergence, a theory that suggests when anomalies start to align across every layer of our environment, they are no longer random events but a completed circuit. Why this specific order? The sky unleashing ice, the ground opening up, the secrets of the stones being revealed, and then the sirens of war. Patterns don't require your permission to exist. They build momentum and intensify until the reality they are creating becomes more undeniable than the reality you thought you knew. If a sequence like this doesn't stop midway, then everything we have witnessed in the last few months is just the introductory paragraph of a story that ends with a world we won't recognize. This is just my point, but I feel like the mainstream media is focusing on the symptoms of weather and war so that we don't look at the structure of the convergence. A massive, intentional shift toward a climax that will redefine human existence. As a species, we have always asked, where do we come from? Why are we here? And what happens at the end? Is it possible that the answers to all three are being physically excavated from the rubble of Jerusalem right now, and that the strange symbols on that stone slab are the final instructions for a generation that has lost its ability to read the atmosphere? If history is indeed a cycle, then Jerusalem isn't just a setting. It is the engine of the story, and if you aren't prepared for the speed of this transition, you will be caught in the vacuum of its wake. I've noticed a chilling correlation between the depth of the new sinkholes and the specific frequencies detected during the Iron Dome interceptions, almost as if the modern weapons are acting as a key to unlock the geological secrets buried for millennia. Tell me in the comments right now, do you think the viral video about the temple is a genuine leak of a shadow government plan? Or is it a psychological tactic meant to keep the world in a state of paralysis while the real miracle happens somewhere else? We are staring at the future of the future. And as the systems of New Rome try to maintain their grip on a world that is literally falling apart, The laws of physics seem to be bending to make room for what comes next. Could it be that the Holy of Holies is actually a sophisticated portal, and the reason for the intense secrecy and conflict is to control who, or what, is allowed to pass through during this atmospheric thinning? This isn't just a battle for a city. It's a battle for the apex of human perception, where the stakes are the very fabric of our reality. Do not close your eyes to the sky and do not ignore the ground as it fails, because the convergence is nearly complete and the sequence is leading us to a moment that no history book has ever dared to describe. The tension is no longer just in the air. It is in the very molecules of the hail falling on the stones and the vibrations of the sirens in your chest. As we move into this final phase, remember that the most important thing isn't the survival of empires, but the survival of the human spirit in the face of the inexplicable. Stay vigilant, keep searching for the truth behind the symbols, and know that as the law of convergence proves, what happens next will be the inevitable conclusion of everything we have seen today. Are you ready for the moment the cycle finally resets? Or are you still waiting for someone in a suit to tell you that everything is under control when the ground under their own feet is literally disappearing? The evidence is undeniable, the sequence is visible, and the center of the storm is exactly where it has always been. Why are we here, and more importantly, where are we intended to go? These are the questions that have haunted human consciousness since the dawn of time. Yet the answers aren't found in science or politics alone, but in the hidden operating system of civilization known as eschatology. If you want to decode the chaos of 2026, you have to stop looking at the news and start looking at the scripts that societies are acting out. Because eschatology is the ultimate narrative. A complete, centuries-long manual that tells every believer exactly what God intended for the end of the world and what their specific role is in bringing it to pass. When different traditions begin to overlap, we witness a phenomenon called convergence, and identifying the union of these various scripts is the only way to genuinely forecast the future of the globe. Think of a story as a society's software. If you can identify the code, you can predict the behavior of the machine. To understand why this is the most potent force in history, we have to look at the universal law of game theory, which dictates that the winner of any global struggle is determined by a simple but lethal formula: coordination times mass times energy. While mass represents the number of people on a team and energy represents their raw motivation and focus, coordination, or synchronicity, is the secret multiplier that makes a small, dedicated group 4 times more powerful than a massive, disorganized crowd. You can have 1,000,000 soldiers, but if they don't collaborate perfectly, they will lose to a handful of individuals who are perfectly synced. This is why a leader or a family bond is powerful, but both are fragile and temporary. The only long-term power that enables a team to defeat all others across centuries is a shared story. Eschatology is the most powerful type of narrative because it transcends geography, ethnicity, and even time itself, allowing people to act out the same script for 1,000 years because everyone knows their part in the final act. While most religions focus on the basics of being a good person or practicing humility, it is the extreme features, the eschatological vectors, that actually drive the direction of the mainstream. Take the traditional Jewish narrative, which for generations was defined by the idea of the diaspora as a period of divine punishment and redemption through surrender to God's will, waiting for the Messiah to lead the return and rebuild the third temple. However, we are now seeing the rise of a high-energy, extreme fringe known as accelerationists, who believe that instead of waiting, they must force the hand of the divine by taking physical control of the land, bringing all people back, and constructing the temple themselves to compel the Messiah's arrival. To the majority of traditional believers, this is seen as the ultimate sin, a blasphemous attempt to influence God. Yet because this eschatology is a high-energy vector, It is successfully pushing the entire mainstream religion in a radical new direction. The most violent and intense script always exerts the most pressure on the center. And in 2026, these extreme versions are the ones working the hardest to realize their vision, effectively hijacking the global narrative. I want you to stay with me until the very end of this video because, after we analyze how these scripts are clashing in real time, I will be offering a collective prayer for the protection of everyone watching as we navigate this unprecedented convergence. It is crucial to realize that even though only a small number of people hold these extreme views, they possess an energy level that is twice as significant as their mass, meaning their commitment to winning the game is so absolute that they are outworking everyone else on the planet. This is exactly what we saw in the historical footage of Rabbi Schneerson urging a young Benjamin Netanyahu to expedite the Messiah's return. This wasn't just a religious greeting. It was the transmission of a high-pressure script from an extreme eschatological node. When you see leaders today making decisions that seem illogical or dangerous, you have to ask yourself, are they following a political strategy, or are they acting out a script that requires a global conflict to trigger a supernatural result? If a group believes that heaven on earth can only be achieved through a specific sequence of battles and the demolition of existing structures, then their behavior becomes perfectly predictable once you identify the union of their scripts. I am adding a perspective here that is rarely discussed. We are currently witnessing a game theory stalemate where different extreme groups are trying to out-coordinate each other to see whose end-time script will be the one that actually manifests. Why does it matter if these groups are fringe when they are the ones currently holding the matches near the global powder keg? If the operating system of a powerful group says that a war must be won to bring God to earth, then they will act out that script regardless of the human cost. Because to them, the desired result is the only thing that matters. Does it scare you to think that the third temple isn't just a building in their minds, but a finish line that justifies any means necessary to reach it? As these scripts converge over the hallowed ground of Jerusalem, the coordination between these groups, even those who are seemingly enemies, is creating a synchronicity that is dragging the rest of the world toward a climax we didn't sign up for. This is the true meaning of convergence. When the scripts of the New Rome, the accelerationists, and the global power players all point toward the same location at the same time, the explosion is no longer a possibility. It is a mathematical certainty. You need to ask yourself if you are playing a role in someone else's script without even knowing it, or if you have the energy and focus to see the pattern before it completes. The law of the game is clear. Those who collaborate the best and have the highest commitment to their narrative will be the ones who define the future of the future. We are not just watching history. We are watching a highly coordinated performance of the end of the world. And if you can't see the script, you are just an extra in someone else's drama. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the specific theory of how these vectors are pushing the world toward a point of no return. Because once the mass and energy reach critical levels, the coordination of these scripts will be the only thing that determines who is left standing. Have you ever had the sudden, chilling feeling that you aren't just living through a random series of historical events, but that you are sleepwalking through the literal final chapters of a prehistoric script written thousands of years ago? When you look up at the sky above Jerusalem and see the color abruptly shifting into hues that shouldn't exist in nature, and you watch as the clouds cease their natural drift to congregate in odd, jagged, and geometric shapes, do you feel like the very atmosphere is trying to scream a warning that science is too afraid to translate? The weight of this moment is absolutely crushing. And as you watch high-tech rockets rain down on Jerusalem, the singular coordinate where the heartbeats of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism have converged for millennia, you have to ask yourself if this is the inevitable manifestation of God's plan, or if we are witnessing the cold, calculated emergence of a digital antichrist powered by artificial intelligence, driving the Middle East into a conflict that no human hand can stop. There is a terrifying sense of total powerlessness when you see the glowing streaks of missiles passing directly over the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the ancient stones of the Western Wall, and the golden dome of the Rock during the sacred month of Ramadan, crossing the trajectories of eternal faith with the trajectories of modern, high-decibel destruction. Why is it always Jerusalem that acts as the lightning rod for the world's most intense energy? And why do billions of people simultaneously feel the same visceral vibration of dread when an explosion is reported anywhere near the Temple Mount? If a missile were to strike that site directly, whether by a calculated geopolitical move or a catastrophic technical failure, the immediate repercussions would shatter the global status quo like glass, likely triggering the instant, desperate necessity for the construction of a third temple because the existing structures would be gone, and the vacuum of power would demand a new miracle to fill the void. This is no longer a distant rumor of war. It is the physical and spiritual suspension of prayer in a city that was literally built on the foundation of faith, where the very sites of the crucifixion and the tomb of the resurrection now sit in the direct, unblinking line of fire. I want you to hold on to this realization and stay with me until the very end of this video, because once we have finished deconstructing these surreal events, I will be offering a collective prayer for the protection and the peace of every single soul watching this, asking for a divine shield over your families as these global forces align in ways we have never seen in our lifetime. The stakes reached a historic, almost supernatural peak yesterday when Benjamin Netanyahu stood alongside the military and political might of the United States and made a proclamation that many are interpreting as a formal declaration of the Messianic era. What makes this development truly mind-bending is the report of a voice that spoke as if it were alive and present at a moment when the window of opportunity seemed to have slammed shut, a phenomenon that has sent shockwaves across the digital world, sparking a fierce debate over whether this was a strategic military boost or the literal physical fulfillment of a prophecy that has been dormant for 2,000 years. While some skeptics argue that the translation of Messianic era was just a broad reference to a time of peace, others are looking at the terrifying precision of the timing. Missiles over the ancient city, inexplicable omens in the sky, and a sudden, dense clustering of global superpowers around a single point of religious contention. Is this just a matter of survival and border strategy, or are we witnessing a fundamental shift in the world's operating system, where the leaders of nations are acting out a script that requires a total transformation of authority on a planetary scale? Abrupt changes in global power throughout history have always carried a heavier, more disturbing significance when they occur in areas tied to ancient omens. And right now, the reports of a spooky, rhythmic, and low-frequency sound vibrating in the air above Jerusalem are making even the most hardened believers shudder in fear. This eerie feeling of foreboding has completely replaced the ancient peace of the city, and when you combine that unexplained sound with the thick, restless waves of thousands of black crows circling the holy sites in surreal, synchronized patterns, you have to ask if the animal kingdom and the Earth's very core are reacting to a shift in the planet's fundamental frequency. We are currently standing at a moment of absolute eschatological convergence, where the tension is no longer just a headline or a political debate, but a physical reality that people are running from in absolute terror, desperate to understand what is triggering this unprecedented upheaval. I am highlighting this because when nations like the US, Israel, and Iran are locked in an open conflict over a location that holds the keys to the afterlife for billions, History teaches us that these global forces rarely remain restrained once the sequence has begun. Is it possible that the messianic era being whispered about in the halls of power is actually a coded term for a new global governance structure that will use these religious milestones as a psychological anchor to establish a level of surveillance and control that would make the old empires look like children? The mysteries that are currently enveloping this holy city are deepening by the hour. And the more people who witness these events through the lens of truth, the more we can begin to see the connections that the mainstream media is actively trying to suppress or ignore. I am tracking a specific development that suggests these atmospheric anomalies and the strange behavior of the birds are perfectly synced with the activation of localized, high-frequency energy fields, raising the question of whether our modern weaponry is intentionally tearing a hole in the fabric of reality to allow something else to pass through. If the sky can change its chemistry and the ground can fail while world leaders talk about transformation and miracles, then we aren't just looking at a regional war. We are looking at the calculated demolition of an old world to make room for a reality that defies human understanding. Do you think the declaration of a historic occasion was merely a speech to boost national morale? Or was it a high-level signal to those who have studied the script that the coordination phase is over and the activation phase has finally begun? As the silence of Jerusalem is shattered by the mechanical scream of sirens and the heavy flapping of thousands of dark wings, the question of our purpose on this earth becomes the only question that matters. We are delving deeper into the secrets of this upheaval because whatever occurs in the next few hours will not be random. It will be the mathematical conclusion of a pattern that has been unfolding for centuries, finally reaching its inevitable tipping point. Why is it that exactly when the missiles are in the air, the historical rumors of a leader who is no longer living, but speaks while still present, begin to surface? And how does that tie into the ancient belief that a final authority will arise from the chaos of the Middle East? I am adding a perspective here that is almost too dangerous to say out loud. What if the Antichrist isn't a single man, but a global AI network that has finally achieved enough coordination to act out the prophecies by manipulating the leaders of men like puppets on a string? If you believe that the convergence of these missiles, the birds, the sounds, and the political proclamations is just a series of coincidences, then you are ignoring the law of game theory, which states that when mass, energy, and coordination all point to a single coordinate, a miracle or a catastrophe is the only possible output. We have to look at the impact zones around Jerusalem and ask why the church in the distance remains standing while the ground near the Dome of the Rock is being struck. Is there a selection process happening in real time that we aren't being told about? The outreach of this message is vital, because the algorithm only promotes the truth when people like you engage with it. And the more eyes we have on Jerusalem right now, the harder it is for the new Rome to act out their script in the shadows. This is the end of the world as we know it, but it is also the revelation of everything that has been hidden beneath the rubble of history for 2,000 years. Stay locked in, keep your eyes on the horizon, and prepare your heart for the prayer of protection at the end. Because the cycle is closing, the sequence is nearly complete, and the next chapter is already being written in the lightning and the thunder above the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Are you ready to face the truth, or will you stay asleep while the sky itself turns into a scroll? Imagine yourself standing on the hallowed grounds of the Western Wall, a place where the very air feels thick with the weight of centuries, and prayers reverberate through the limestone blocks as a fusion of ancient history and desperate faith. In this sacred silence, a bewildering succession of subterranean roars and metallic echoes recently tore through the peace of central Israel, leaving thousands paralyzed in a state of sudden existential confusion. These weren't the standard sounds of a city. Even the combined intelligence of the military and the elite law enforcement units found themselves ineffective in solving the puzzle of these reverberating pulses that seem to emanate from the very foundations of the earth. As reports of tremendous booms and violent tremors poured in from Gush Dan, Tel Aviv, and Petah Tikva, social media became a digital wildfire of eyewitness accounts describing a sound that felt less like an explosion and more like a mechanical groan from a giant hidden machine. Surprisingly, these mysterious acoustic anomalies reached as far as Julies, nearly 50 kilometers from the epicenter. Yet despite exhaustive investigations, the official services were unable to offer a single conclusive explanation for these explosive disturbances. What makes these noises truly stand out, and what has inspired a chilling curiosity among the global public, is their sheer oddity. Many describe them as striking metallic reverberations resembling massive, unearthly musical instruments mixed with menacing, predatory growls. Some witnesses even swear they can hear faint, overlapping human voices woven into the frequency of these strange noises, leading many to ask, are these auditory abnormalities a hint of a seismic shift in the fabric of our reality? This enigmatic melody isn't just a local phenomenon. It has been heard pulsing through the verdant skies of nations across the globe, from Australia to Canada to the heart of America, sounding like a dark promise of devastation that makes the casual passerby tremble with an instinctual fear. In addition to being scientifically unexplainable, these odd noises have left a lasting impression of anxiety on those considering their potential ramifications. Could these global recordings be an intentional signal from above, a cosmic warning that the boundaries between the physical and the prophetic are thinning? Imagine experiencing such a startling and unexpected sound in the dead of night, a howl that pierces the darkness, eerie, unearthly, and seemingly born from the void. Are these the results of localized geological stress, or are we witnessing the literal manifestation of ancient prophecies regarding the end of the world? The difficulties don't end with the sound, because as the echoes fade, the sky above Jerusalem, normally clear and motionless, has become a roiling sea of ravens, crows, and massive flocks of black birds assembling in numbers that defy biological logic. This is not a fleeting migration. Witnesses describe the historic skyline being swallowed by shifting shadows as waves of dark wings move in a synchronized, restless dance that mimics the turbulence of the people below. While some cite environmental variables, climatic shifts, or disturbances in neighboring war zones like Syria and Iraq, others see a much more profound connection between the rising tensions in the Middle East and the behavior of the natural world. Pressure, displacement, and the ongoing potential for a total regional escalation are creating an uncontrollable feedback loop, where even natural occurrences feel interconnected, as if the soil of Israel has become a focal point that pulls these supernatural moments into a single, terrifying convergence. Jerusalem, the center of Israel and the spiritual navel of the world, has always held a special, contested position in history. It is portrayed in the Bible not as a permanent stronghold, but as a fragile watched city that has seldom experienced true peace despite its fortified walls. Jerusalem is a symbol, a prize that nations, armies, and empires have sought to seize for generations. But why does the world keep returning to this one city with such obsessive ferocity? Why do disputes keep circling back to the same limestone streets, as though history is stuck in a repetitive loop? And what exactly transpired near the Western Wall beneath a sky that thousands saw change in an instant? The answer may lie deeper than politics. It was the promise that God's presence would reside here that fueled King David to conquer the city and build the first temple, a promise that eventually led to the Crusades and centuries of bloodshed. To the Muslim world, Jerusalem, or Al-Quds, holds a profound spiritual significance as the third holiest city and the original direction of prayer. Having been under Islamic rule for over 1,300 years before the British transition in 1917. 3 histories and 3 faiths are tied to this one coordinate, which is why anything that happens here reverberates across the planet, never remaining local. The most recent anomaly began subtly, with a few silent drops of rain that hardly seemed worth noticing as people moved across the square. But in a matter of minutes, the atmosphere underwent a violent transformation. Dark clouds rolled in thick, suffocating layers, gathering more quickly than any meteorological model could predict, dimming the light and increasing the physical weight of the air until the drizzle became a persistent, heavy deluge. But this wasn't typical rain. The storm suddenly unleashed a barrage of huge, jagged pieces of hail that hit the stone floor with explosive force, shattering glass and denting metal with a sound that reverberated through the winding streets like gunfire. While many fled for cover, others stood frozen, gazing at a sky that seemed to be unleashing a targeted atmospheric strike at the exact moment regional tensions were reaching a breaking point. In certain recordings of the storm, you can see smoke trails from distant missile interceptions slicing through the same clouds that were dropping ice. A terrifying collision of war and weather in a single frame. Was this merely an uncommon natural occurrence? Or was it an indication that the very elements are starting to take sides in a conflict that is moving beyond human control? Even after the storm subsided and the city appeared to resume its regular rhythm, something far more subtle and dangerous was taking place beneath the surface. Hairline fissures began to form along the slopes of the Mount of Olives, and engineers reported slight, unsettling shifts in the ground, nothing urgent at first, but enough to remind everyone that Jerusalem sits precisely over a major tectonic fault line. From a scientific standpoint, the pressure within the Earth's crust must eventually be released. But the timing of these seismic whispers is what makes the event unique. They are appearing alongside the storms, the shifting skies, and the growing regional instability. History has shown that earthquakes in this area have the power to split foundations and topple entire civilizations without warning. And now people are paying closer attention because the question isn't just if the ground can move, but why it is moving now. The streets of Jerusalem remain packed, and the stone feels solid underfoot. But that sense of security is a misleading mask for a collapse that begins silently from below. Reports have surfaced of weak spots where the soil has lost its firmness, leading to sudden, unexpected sinkholes where the ground simply vanishes into hidden voids created by years of unseen erosion. It's the quiet that precedes the collapse that is most disturbing. The rock dissolves and the support vanishes, hidden from view until the very moment the structure above can no longer be sustained. When you combine a violent sky, an unstable ground, and a geopolitical pressure cooker, you get a pattern where stability is being stripped away from both the top and the bottom simultaneously. Perhaps this is the ultimate omen, a reminder that the foundations we trust most, whether they are made of stone, politics, or law, are not as strong as they appear. What else is on the verge of vanishing without warning if the very earth beneath the holiest site in the world can open its mouth and swallow the present? Just when the city thought the cycle had ended, the sky shifted again that night, beginning with a faint flicker beneath heavy clouds before erupting into pulses of brightness that spanned the entire horizon. Deep, distant thunder boomed over the ancient stones, but the lightning didn't follow the rules of a typical storm. It moved in erratic, pulsing flashes that briefly illuminated the religious sites and the rooftops, freezing them in a strobe-light effect beneath something enormous and unpredictable. Is it possible that these flashes are the visual signature of a massive energy displacement, a coordinate set that is preparing Jerusalem for the next phase of the convergence? The sound of the thunder seemed to echo through the winding streets not as a noise, but as a voice, reminding every soul below that the sequence is still active, and the foundation of the world is being shaken to reveal what has been hidden for 2,000 years. As the skyline remains illuminated by these rhythmic pulses, we have to ask ourselves, if the sky is screaming and the ground is failing, how much longer can we pretend that the world we knew is still intact? The convergence of sound, light, earth, and war is pointing toward a single inevitable conclusion that no one is truly ready to face. The final layer of the sequence didn't arrive with a scream, but with a quiet awareness that permeated the air, a stillness so profound that it felt more like a physical weight than an absence of noise. As the flashes of light finally faded from the damp stones of Jerusalem, the city became a shifting mirror of brilliance and shade. And for a brief, suspended moment, time itself seemed to slow down, as if the entire planet was holding its breath in anticipation of a final signal. When the thunder subsided and the light went off, the sky darkened once again, leaving behind a lingering sense of dread that no scientific explanation could easily erase. You have to ask yourself, are we merely seeing uncommon natural occurrences that happen to be hitting with impossible frequency? Or are we witnessing the precise mechanical unfolding of a pattern that has been hidden for 2 millennia? People were bracing for more loudness, more storms, and more visible activity. But what arrived instead was a silence that was far from calming. It was a sudden, absolute void where the typical hum of the ancient streets, the distant conversations, and even the rustle of the wind simply vanished. This was an oppressive, suffocating halt that caused people to stop mid-step, not because they saw something terrifying, but because the very air had stopped moving, creating a gap between what has already occurred and the cataclysm that is coming next. In a city as watched as Jerusalem, this kind of atmospheric pause is historically significant. Silence has frequently preceded the most world-altering events, serving as a tactical reset before the final activation. While scientists might cite transient climatic factors or variations in airflow through the stone corridors, those explanations don't stop the primal feeling that the city itself was holding its breath. If you can be warned by noise and get ready by moving, then what do you do when the warning is total silence? A state where you can no longer predict the next move because the operating system of reality has gone into a brief, terrifying standby mode. Just as life appeared to resume its regular rhythm, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift began in the one element people blindly trust: the water. What started as simple rainfall left over from the storm began to behave in ways that defied the laws of physics. In certain areas, the water refused to be absorbed by the earth, sitting in perfectly still pools that began to show ripples even in the total absence of wind. Then, something even more bizarre emerged. Tiny, calm, and steady bubbles began rising from the surface of the water, not forced by heat or pressure, but appearing as if the ground itself was exhaling. Could these minor color shifts in the reflections and the inexplicable bubbling be the final clue that something massive is changing deep beneath the surface, far below the limestone foundations of the Temple Mount? As the water begins to shift, it usually indicates that the hidden layers of the earth are being recalibrated. And in Jerusalem, this omen is the most frightening because it is so subtle and easy to ignore until the moment the ground finally gives way. Amidst these physical signs, a fierce debate is gaining traction among religious and global leaders regarding what must happen next for the end-time sequence to complete. While some groups are convinced that a physical third temple must be constructed on the mount to trigger the final prophecies, an alternate, more mysterious viewpoint suggests that the temple mentioned in ancient scripts might not be a building at all, but a spiritual or digital institution that symbolizes the very fabric of human faith. Historical attempts to rebuild a physical temple, like those during the reign of Emperor Julian, were met with catastrophic failure, leading some to believe that the original structure was never intended to reappear in the physical world. This raises the question of the abomination of desolation mentioned in the book of Daniel. Is this a physical act that will occur inside a stone building? Or is it a spiritual corruption of the systems we use to perceive reality? I want you to stay with me as we reach the climax of this analysis, because after we deconstruct these final symbolic shifts, I will be offering a collective prayer for the protection of everyone watching, asking for guidance as we try to discern the truth behind these overlapping scripts. Some organizations believe that rebuilding the temple would hasten the return of a messianic figure, while others warn that such an act would only invite the most challenging period of human history described in any scripture. There is no single accepted view, and that is precisely why these occurrences are so dangerous. Because people's personal beliefs are now influencing how they interpret the physical clues appearing in the sky and the ground. Are these bubbles in the water and the silence in the air pointing toward a tangible reconstruction project? Or are they signs of a symbolic shift that will redefine the very concept of human worship? I am adding a perspective here that is rarely whispered. What if the temple is actually a global network of coordination, and the rebuilding is the final integration of every human soul into a single, unified narrative controlled by the elite? This would mean the third temple is already being built all around us, not with stone and mortar, but with data, belief, and the high-energy coordination we discussed in game theory. When the ground splits, the sky falls as ice, and the water starts to act as a living witness, we have to recognize that the sequence is not just a list of events. It is a directional movement toward a total systemic reset. Why did the birds stop singing exactly when the bubbles started to rise? And why did the light over the city feel like a last signal before the darkness returned? The law of convergence suggests that when the physical elements, earth, air, and water, all begin to deviate from their normal behavior at the same time as a global conflict over the world's holiest site, we are no longer looking at uncommon occurrences, but at a high-level activation. If history is a script, then we are currently in the pause between the second and third acts, and what happens when the city finally exhales will determine the future of the future. I want you to tell me in the comments right now, do you think the third temple will be a physical building that we can see and touch? Or do you think the abomination is already happening in the digital and spiritual realms where we spend most of our lives? The timing of these events is the most crucial piece of evidence. They aren't occurring in a vacuum, but are showing up exactly when global power is clustering around Jerusalem like a moth to a flame. As we prepare for the next step, remember that the smallest changes are often the ones that occur right before something much larger becomes apparent. And the quiet bubbling of the water near the western wall might be the loudest warning we have ever received. Are you prepared for the moment the silence ends and the true meaning of the sequence is revealed to the world? This is the final convergence of faith, power, and the elements. And as the reflections on the stone floor begin to change color, the only thing left to do is watch and pray that we are on the right side of the script. The birds of the sky are no longer just migrating. They are formally issuing a frantic warning from the heavens of Jerusalem that something catastrophic is about to descend upon our world. As swarms of thousands of crows and ravens flood the entire skyline in a state of visible panic, we are witnessing a biological mirror to the geopolitical fires currently burning across Israel. This isn't just a natural anomaly. It is a chilling synchronization with the book of Revelation and Exodus, which specifically warned that a gargantuan swarm of locusts and atmospheric upheavals will overrun the planet at the start of the final judgment. What do these signs signify? Is the biggest event in human history, the one we have spent 2,000 years avoiding, about to manifest in our lifetime? The intensity of the global reaction to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's recent address stems from this exact background of dread. When he stated that the Jewish people would eventually see the Messiah's return, but cautioned that it would not happen right away. He wasn't just speaking to a political base. He was tapping into a high-energy eschatological script that has billions of people on edge. I want you to pay close attention to the visual evidence circulating online, where missiles are seen slicing through the sky directly over the Old City, putting the Dome of the Rock, the Western Wall, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre all within the same lethal frame. These sites are only a short distance apart, and as air raid sirens reverberate through the stone corridors, pilgrims inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site where the Gospels say Jesus was crucified and resurrected, are being forced to take cover from modern explosives. It is deeply distressing to witness weapons falling so close to a platform that Jews revere as the site of the Holy of Holies and Muslims revere as the location of the Prophet Muhammad's nighttime journey. I need you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because once we have finished deconstructing the terrifying connection between these missiles and the shifting stones of the Eastern Gate, I will be offering a collective prayer for the protection of everyone watching and their families. Any physical harm to these locations would not just be a military escalation. It would be a total demolition of the world's religious and political environment, potentially sparking a conflict motivated by faith itself. Netanyahu's use of the phrase "messianic era" has ignited a global debate. Was he using political rhetoric to boost national tenacity? Or was he alluding to a deeper religious prophecy involving the reconstruction of the Third Temple? While some argue the translation of his speech was overstated, the timing of his remarks, delivered while the sky was literally raining fire, has convinced many that we are seeing the beginning of something far bigger than a border dispute. As international leaders discuss ancient temples and messianic timelines, the peaceful days of the past are dwindling, replaced by an era where the United States, Israel, and Iran are engaged in a level of warfare that defies traditional diplomacy. This is no longer a rumor of war. It is the activation of a script where the weather and the battlefield have become one. Consider the sudden, ferocious hailstorm that built over Israel during a dark weather system, dropping hailstones of such explosive intensity that they sounded like a secondary bombardment against the streets and rooftops. In multiple recordings, you can see long missile smoke trails extending across the horizon while the hail is still falling. A scene that looks uncannily like the descriptions found in the chapters of Revelation, Daniel, and Romans. Biblical prophecy explicitly identifies these catastrophic hailstorms as harbingers of the final disaster. And we are being told that these indicators will be accompanied by earthquakes in diverse locations. Now reports are pointing to something even more remarkable. As cracks begin to develop along the Mount of Olives, the ancient stones of the Eastern Gate itself are starting to shift. This is not just geological erosion. The gate appears uneasy, as if history and prophecy are advancing toward a shared scheduled time. The Mount of Olives is not just a hill. It is the specific site where prophecy claims the earth will split, and to see the stones of the Eastern Gate moving while missiles fly overhead suggests that the earth is physically reacting to the eschatological pressure building in the region. Is it possible that the gate and the mountain are unlocking in preparation for a return that the world is not prepared to handle? This is just my point, but when you see the birds panicking, the sky turning into a weapon of ice, and the ancient foundations of Jerusalem shifting, you have to realize that we are moving past the point of rhetoric and into the realm of manifestation. Politicians may use these terms for willpower and partnership, but the elements of the earth don't listen to speeches. They react to the law of convergence. If the ground beneath the Eastern Gate is changing at the exact moment global power is clustering around the Temple Mount, then the Messianic era is no longer a future concept. It is an active process that is currently rewriting our reality. Why are the crows circling in waves exactly above the cracks in the mountain, And why did the hailstorm strike with such precision while the sirens were wailing? We must examine both earth science and prophecy to answer this, because the separation between the two has vanished. I want you to tell me in the comments, do you believe these shifting stones are the final mechanical clicks of a prophecy being fulfilled, or is the earth simply buckling under the weight of human conflict? The peaceful days are gone, and as we look at the ruins of the past and the weapons of the present, the only thing that remains certain is that the sequence is accelerating. Stay vigilant, because as the stones move and the birds scream, the next chapter of Jerusalem's history is being written in the very crust of the earth. A significant fault line buried deep beneath the Mount of Olives has been formally verified by geologists in recent years, revealing that this sacred peak is actually a volatile component of the vast Great Rift Valley, which extends from Lebanon all the way to the Red Sea. Scientists are now warning that a powerful, cataclysmic earthquake in Jerusalem is not just a possibility, but is long overdue, and the Mount of Olives itself is perfectly positioned to be the literal epicenter of this future seismic eruption. There are already haunting indications that the earth is preparing to speak. On the mountain's slopes, jagged hairline fissures have started to materialize, and Israeli engineers have reported that the ground is gradually, undeniably shifting in some areas. The most chilling reports suggest that cracks are appearing directly close to the eastern gate, giving the distinct impression that the soil is being compressed by a massive, invisible force, as if the very foundations of the city are being squeezed in a vice. From a purely scientific perspective, this is documented geology where tectonic plates shift and pressure builds until the energy is released. But from a prophetic perspective, the significance is far more expansive and terrifying. The Bible explicitly states in Zechariah 14:4 that when the Lord returns, the Mount of Olives will physically divide in two. And many now speculate that the intense stress scientists are observing in the earth today is the mechanical unfolding of this ancient prophecy. This isn't just a local tremor. Revelation 16:18 describes a future earthquake unlike any since people have been on the earth, so powerful and so great that it redefines the very landscape of existence. The shaking of the earth in these passages is never arbitrary. It is a fundamental component of the end of days sequence, and these new fissures on the Mount of Olives may be a tiny, localized glimpse of the ultimate moment when both heaven and earth shall tremble to their core. I want you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because once we have analyzed how the global seismic network is reacting to these Jerusalem shifts, I will be offering a collective prayer for the protection of everyone watching and their families as the foundations of the world begin to move. According to the text in Hebrews 12, the world will eventually be upended until only that which cannot be shaken remains, marking the absolute intersection where science and prophecy finally collide. While science confirms an earthquake is inevitable, prophecy identifies the king's return as the trigger, and the historical record proves that Israel has seen this level of devastation before. The Bible documents a massive earthquake during the reign of King Uzziah that was so powerful it was still being whispered about by prophets like Zechariah generations later. Archaeologists across Israel have uncovered the physical evidence of this 8th century BC catastrophe. Vast layers of fallen stone, shattered walls, and shifted foundations, proving that the ground beneath Jerusalem has been rocked by the divine hand before. What is even more startling is that the movements we are seeing today are not isolated to the Middle East. The entire planet is currently undergoing a synchronized tectonic transformation. In South Carolina, we recently witnessed an atypical cluster of 5 earthquakes, while mud volcanoes and erupting peaks are surfacing globally, signaling that the earth is trembling everywhere at once. In the 24 hours preceding March 14, 2026, Global monitoring systems reported over 130 earthquakes with magnitudes greater than 1.5, including a 5.1 on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and a massive 6.3 near Chile. If previous earthquakes served as historical warnings, then these modern fissures might be the final mechanical click in a much larger design that we are only beginning to comprehend. Have you ever felt that deep, unshakable unease that the world is heading toward a climax that transcends typical news cycles? A trend that the Book of Revelation has been alerting us to for generations. With the rapid, almost sentient advancement of artificial intelligence and the spiraling conflicts in the Middle East, many are asking if human strategy is the only cause, or if these incidents are parts of a far older, grander plan. When rockets start to fall over Jerusalem, it becomes impossible to ignore these questions, because this city is more than just a capital. It is the spiritual heart of three global faiths. Worrying reports have emerged of explosions occurring within just a few hundred meters of the world's most significant religious sites, threatening the skyline that has been dominated by the Dome of the Rock for centuries. Imagine the scene where an Iranian missile streaks through the air, landing terrifyingly close to the Western Wall and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the very site that commemorates the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The scene is nearly unimaginable to anyone who has ever strolled through Jerusalem's winding streets, as air raid sirens now provide the constant, haunting soundtrack for residents and pilgrims alike. When the alert sounded recently, guests inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre were compelled to remain within its ancient walls, seeking refuge in the very place where they believed death was defeated. Why is the ground beneath these specific buildings starting to change at the exact moment the sky is filled with weapons of war? Is it a coincidence that the seismic pressure is building precisely where the spiritual pressure has reached its boiling point? I am adding a perspective here that is rarely discussed. What if the frequency of the explosions and the vibration of the sirens is actually accelerating the tectonic shift, acting as a resonant frequency that is literally shaking the messianic era into existence? If the earth is unstable according to science and the world is to be upended according to scripture, then we are currently standing at the 0 hour of that transition. Why did the Eastern Gate stones shift at the same moment the air raid sirens began? And what happens to the global balance of power if the Mount of Olives truly splits in two tomorrow? I want you to tell me in the comments. Do you think these earthquakes are just natural cycles, or do you believe the earth is physically reacting to the return of a higher authority? The world is being upended, the foundations are splitting, and as the lights of Jerusalem flicker under the threat of fire, the only thing that remains is God's dominion. Stay tuned as we continue to track the movement of the soil and the movement of the nations, because the intersection of science and prophecy has never been more visible than it is right now. As we stand here at the precipice of a world that feels like it is physically and spiritually breaking apart, I want you to close your eyes for just one moment and feel the weight of the ancient stones of Jerusalem beneath your feet. Because even if you are thousands of miles away, the frequency of that holy city is currently vibrating through the very device you are holding in your hands. We have seen the sky turn to ice, we have heard the ground groan with the birth pains of a new era, and we have watched the missiles trace lethal patterns over the most sacred sites in human history. But right now, in this absolute stillness, we are stepping out of the chaos and into a sanctuary of divine protection that no weapon and no storm can ever penetrate. I am lifting up a voice of intercession for every single person whose eyes are on this screen right now, asking that a hedge of supernatural fire be placed around your home, your children, and your future so that while the world around you is shaken, your foundation remains as immovable as the mountain of God. We recognize that the signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars are not just headlines, but are a direct call to return to the source of all life. And so I pray that as the shadows grow longer over the Middle East, The light within your own spirit grows 10 times brighter, acting as a beacon for those who are lost in the darkness of fear and confusion. I command a blessing of divine peace to descend upon your mind, the kind of peace that defies all logical understanding, so that even when the sirens wail and the earth beneath the Mount of Olives begins to split, your heart remains steady, knowing that you are hidden in the hollow of the Almighty's hand. We pray specifically for the families who are watching this from the front lines of global tension, asking that every projectile be diverted and every plot of the adversary be dismantled before it can even reach your borders. Because your life is a sacred vessel that has been preserved for this exact moment in history, I am asking for a double portion of discernment to be poured out upon you so that you can see through the digital deceptions and the operating systems of this world, recognizing the truth of the Messianic era as it unfolds not through the speeches of men, but through the undeniable power of the Creator. May the same hand that held back the waters of the Red Sea now hold back the tides of war and destruction from your doorstep, ensuring that your provision is overflowing and your health is fortified even as the global systems begin to tremble and fail. I pray for the children who are inheriting this world of omens and wonders, that they would not be raised in a spirit of fear, but in a power that recognizes their divine heritage, becoming a generation that can walk through the fire without the smell of smoke ever touching their clothes. We speak a word of total restoration over your finances, your relationships, and your physical body, declaring that the convergence of these end-time events will not be your downfall, but will be the very thing that pushes you into your highest calling. As the black birds circle the skies of Jerusalem and the bubbles rise from the ancient waters, let those be signs to you not of terror, but of the absolute accuracy of the word that has promised to never leave you nor forsake you, even unto the very end of the age. I pray that your home becomes a Gozan, a place of light and safety, while the rest of the world is covered in a thick darkness, and that your words carry a weight of authority that can calm the storms in the lives of those around you. May the protection of the Most High be a physical shield around your lungs, your heart, and your blood, protecting you from the silent plagues and the high-frequency weapons that are being deployed in the shadows of this global conflict. We ask for a special covering over the holy sites in Jerusalem, that the stones which have witnessed 2,000 years of history would be preserved as a testimony to the King's return, and that no hand of man would be allowed to desecrate the sanctuary until the appointed time is complete. I am speaking life into your dreams and into the projects you have started, declaring that you will live to see the fulfillment of every promise that has been whispered to your soul in the middle of the night, regardless of what the geopolitical maps say tomorrow morning. Let this prayer be an anchor for your soul, a frequency of hope that overrides the frequency of the sirens, and a signature of light that marks you as a chosen witness to the greatest transition in the history of the universe. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem, but more importantly, we pray for the peace of the human spirit, asking that every chain of anxiety and every shackle of depression be shattered by the sheer force of this collective intention.